We just don't have Rahul. We also have our co-facilitator, Sabina. Sabina has an academic background in design thinking. She's done it from Politecnico di Milano University of Milan, Italy. And she has 10 years under her belt as a design thinker and innovation and entrepreneurship consultant. Her forte is workshop design and facilitation. She does service design, trend mapping, disruptive innovation, and system thinking. And she has played a very good role in future sustainable lifestyle in Brazil, India, and China. And for ongoing UN creative communities for sustainable lifestyle project. That seems like a lot to me to hear. And with no further ado, I'll just stop sharing my screen and I will put Rahul Andrews into the spotlight. Hi, Rahul. Thank
Hello,
you
hi
so much.
Agalia.
Thank you so
Hi
much for
everyone.
being here today. Thanks a lot. And yeah,
Thank
the
you for the
floor is yours.
opportunity.
The floor is yours, and yeah, all for you.
Great. Thank you so much, Agalia, Natasha, and Piyush. And thank you everyone for taking time for this session. I'd like to put a caveat right up front and say that I wouldn't dream of facilitating a design thinking workshop without a visual thinker. So every design thinking workshop is successful only because there is a visual thinker in that. And folks like Natasha and Agalia have been part of every design thinking workshop that I do. I am also lucky to have my colleague Sabina here because Sabina is a true true design thinker. She has studied it and she has practiced it both. And so we're going to co-host this session. And with that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull up a quick introduction to the session. So just a quick check if the screen is up here. Yep, all right. So what I'd like to do is kick this off. And before we get into the actual conversations, I'd like to share a little bit more about each of us and what we do. Add a little more to what Agalia gave us by way of introductions, those great introductions. So Sabina, over to you for a little bit about what you've been doing. Yeah, Sabina, we don't hear you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Rahul, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, wherever you are in the world. Agalia has already introduced both of us, but I'm going to be very brief here. I think what I absolutely love about the work that I do, it allows me to be at the intersection of innovation, entrepreneurship, and the arts. How so? Of course, I have a decade of experience working with companies like Samsung, IT, like Urban Ladder, Pepperfry. These are mainly in the Indian context. Forgive me if my video goes off because I am on a slightly challenged data network here in rural India, so it might toggle a little bit. Don't mind. The tools that I've been using, as Agalia mentioned, are an entire gamut from is the sound also not too good? Hello? Is it better now?
We can hear you, Sabina.
So I'm going to continue.
There is a lag in between. I'm just letting you know, but just go on. Still.
Okay, sure thing. All right. If it gets too bad, then you will notify, right? Okay. So the tools cover an entire gamut from trend mapping, service design, scenario visualization, photography, and we're going to talk a lot about these as we go into the design thinking frameworks, so you get a context to it. My proudest work to date has definitely had to do with sustainable development, basically envisioning future lifestyles of how people might live in India, Brazil, China, and all across the world. I think my biggest forte is really being a bridge builder. A bridge builder between.
Just a minute, Sabina. The audio is really breaking, and it's becoming very impossible for people to hear you. Is there something that we could do?
Okay, so I'm going to then hand it over to Rahul to continue, and then I'll come in a little later. That's fine.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yes, Rahul. We will just move on to you a little bit till she gets a hold on technology.
Sure. And just to kind of help close the last part of the conversation that Sabina was covering, as a colleague, I know that Sabina is very passionate about social impact, and a lot of her work in design thinking has been in that area. So in a post-COVID world, she is really looking at what does that mean for society and for uh, how this is going to change the way people are going to interact with each other with a social impact, right? A quick introduction about myself. I spent a significant part of my career in the corporate world. A lot of that was with IT consulting organizations. And then I made a career shift into facilitation about 10 years back, a little more than 10 years back, 14 years back. And I've been focused on business transformations ever since. My last role was with the accelerated solutions environment with Capgemini in India. And as a part of that, I worked very closely with a lot of leaders who were responsible for effecting business transformations. And that's something that I'm passionate about. And as a part of it, as an outcome of that journey, I've become very extremely ingrained with working with models and frameworks around systems thinking and design thinking. And I think the two are really very complementary to each other. People sometimes wonder, are these mutually exclusive? And I don't think so. I think they just dovetail very beautifully with each other. I also have played some roles with the Value Web, which is a not-for-profit organization that uses the MG Taylor methodology for social transformation. And I've had the opportunity to work with them here in India. I'm also part of the MG Taylor global community. And I've just begun the role of playing a mentor for change with the Atal Tinkering Labs. And it's something I'm curious to see how is it going to impact education in India. I also have my own, okay, sorry, I just need to, I just learned this from Piyush and I've already, okay. So this is my website. So I started Cognify Labs about 4 years back. And the beauty of this is it's an extremely lean setup. So it's a sole proprietorship firm, which is me. But as I said, I cannot think of any transformation work without a network of experts and folks like Agalya, Natasha, and so many more in the community become a part of these transformation workshops when we come together and deliver these outcomes. And so we talk about how do you accelerate business transformations, not just business transformations, but social transformations and digital transformations also. We work very closely with the concepts of product and service accelerators, journey labs, business narratives. Business narratives is really about storytelling, and it uses visual thinking significantly. And then there's digital transformation, which is now becoming more and more popular. There are a few case studies, and what I thought I'll share a little bit more about are, so this is probably where I want to talk a little bit about the global community. As I said, we are a part of a global community, and these are folks who have more than 20, 25 years of experience, and we're almost a 500 member strong community which practices collaboration engineering, as I call it. And I think we're realizing that now in this new world, collaboration is going to go virtual, and it's going to become even more interesting when high touch, low tech is going to flip over, and it seems to be pushing towards high tech, low touch. And well, you can never wish away the touch. And so it's going to be about how do you balance the two. So with that, I'm going to be back to kicking off our session. I just wanted to share this little poster that I saw at the National Institute of Design campus in Ahmedabad. And I was there about 2-3 years back. And it caught my eye because I just love the way it spoke about how design is really about ways of seeing. What I realized after reading this and thinking a lot about it is, when an author writes a book, that's his version, or that's his way of seeing differently, because each book is seen through the lens of that specific author about a topic that could have been seen differently by another author, right? Music is again a way of seeing the world differently. Art is again a way of seeing things differently. They say that a painting is never meant to be interpreted in one single way, but the artist has actually left it open for it to be interpreted the way each viewer chooses to see it. And so to me, ways of seeing are really about design, and design is really about the potential that is out there waiting to be elicited out, because it is meant to solve where it's meant to see the art of the possible, it's meant to see the art of the probable, and how do you make that come into being, into reality. So to design really is to seek and practice ways of seeing. And to me, that's really the context of why we would talk about design thinking and visual thinking being really strong and actually getting dovetailed in the way it goes about trying to identify the right problems to solve and the solutions that will make it different from the solutions that were otherwise been very spontaneously attempted, right? And so how does design thinking make you take a few steps back and diagnose the problem before you really try to solution it, much before you've really understood the problem. So with this, I'm going to invite Sabina to talk a little bit about what are we facing today in our world where we think design thinking challenges are really out there waiting to be solved and addressed, right? So Sabina, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Rahul. Is this a lot better now for everybody? Am I clear and audible?
Yes, Sabina, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So fantastic. Okay. So once again, I mean, I think we are really, really glad to have all of you. And I'm going to give this a try. If it gets too bad, then please put your responses on chat, and then we'll toggle back to Rahul. Right. So you have come here to learn about design thinking frameworks and visual thinking tools. But we also have an ask from you. In fact, it's a rather overconfident ask, but we feel that you will be able to do it. What we are going to do, slides up, is really create a playbook with design.
Reena, we lost you. I think we lost her.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Rahul, can we?
Yeah, I'll just take. Sure.
Please?
So what Sabina really was asking us to be is to be an agent of change, because we
Yes.
are speaking about being agents of change. So yes, Sabina, that's the cue for you. Back to you, Sabina.
So this is playing out like a podcast. So this is really the ask from you. Yes, it's clear or still bad?
It isn't clear, Sabina.
Okay, so what we'll do is I will stay in the background and I will let Rahul take over, and then maybe
Yes.
I'll come back in the Q&A session. I think that's a good idea, right?
And also just stay with the chat. If in case some question comes up, feel free to handle the chats in one sense, till we go to the Q&A.
Yes.
Okay. That way you can be active.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Done.
Yes.
Done. Yeah. Thank you.
So Sabina was asking us to be agents of change, and once we go through these modules, which are going to introduce you to design thinking frameworks, we're going to introduce a playbook, and then we're also going to show you examples of how these have been used at client projects, so that you get familiar with both the theory and the practice, and you are able to try these out when you go back to your desk. Right. So with that, what Sabina had lined up, and which I'm going to now take over on her behalf, is there are a lot of these visuals which have become very prominent in the recent past, ever since we've been addressing the whole COVID crisis. And what we'd like to do is to say, look at some of these and think about how they've been used, or what kind of problems have come out which are strongly related to some of these visuals, right? And so we're beginning to see a COVID vocabulary, and what we'd like you all to do individually as an exercise is to take 5 or 6 of these images to define a problem in your community. Now, I've taken 5 of these images here, and these are meant to delineate a problem statement which says that there is a quarantined lady who is isolated at home and she needs food delivery at her doorstep, but in a contactless manner, right? And how can that problem be solved? And so we see some of these images. So when I go back to that little universe of images, out of those, there must be about 15 images out here, maybe plus or minus a few more. But when I take 5 or 6 of these, I am able to define a problem statement that becomes apparent when you see it in this form, right? So this is one example of how you might be able to create a problem statement that you see unique to your environment and within your sphere of influence. And just to take another example, there are new workplace rules, some do's and some don'ts that have started emerging at our office spaces. And again, when we look at these intuitively, we begin to understand what they're saying to us. When I walk into the door at office, for those of us who are allowed to go back to offices, it's very obvious that I'm meant not to be at the water cooler, shaking hands, or getting together in a conference room with a lot of people, or forgetting to wash my hands every now and then, right? And then the do's become very apparent again. It's about wearing a mask, it's about keeping the social distance, it's about using sanitizers. And so these visuals don't really need to be explained. They become quite apparent in defining and creating a social agreement and creating a set of rules that become intuitively our own. Now, what I'd like you to do is to go back to this little set of images. I'd like you to choose about 5 or 6 of these, not too many, but not too less, and come up with a problem statement that you think you would like to work around. Now, we're not going to ask you to work around this through this entire session, but just for this little activity, create it, write it down in your notebook. And if you want to introduce some new symbols, you're most welcome to do that. But try and see if you can craft a problem statement the way we just introduced with 2 examples. One problem statement that is touching your life as we go through these times. So let's take the next few minutes to do that. If you have any queries, feel free to post those on the chat box.
Can you show the pictures again?
Sure. Here, Mridula. Yeah, Sabina, if I've left out something, feel free to jump in and add.
Sabina is actually live on chat and she's taking care of that there.
I have a story.
Go on. Do you want to talk about it? You should show it before the screen and talk about it.
So I picked up a few icons, and then I came up with something. There's a guy and there's a girl, and they cannot touch each other or meet each other. So there are a lot of emotional or relationship things which are going on. So this is the problem statement which I could find from these images, from these icons.
Okay, interesting.
I have
Anyone
one.
else?
I
Yes.
This is Bala here.
I think Mridula, just wait for a minute. Bala, let him finish, and then I'll keep you.
Yeah, so my concept is social distancing doesn't mean distancing from humanity.
Hmm.
So I just draw like a person just showing love to the needies, that the migrants and all, right? We have the crisis now. So the picture
Okay.
is visible.
Not that much. If you can get it a little bit closer, yes. Yeah, now it is.
Okay.
And also your background is
Yeah.
a bit
No, it is
visible.
okay. No, it is okay.
Yeah, now it is okay. Thank
So
you.
like showing love to others. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mridula, yes, go on. Just a minute, Rahul. Mridula, go on.
is it visible? Um,
Mhm.
No, it's
Put it.
yeah.
now it is, yes.
Yeah, so I have the problem statement is there's virus, there's no traveling, and people cannot meet. So we can use maybe visual or like online digital platforms, and family time to spend our time together and be connected.
Thank you, Mridula. Okay.
So I have a story question.
Yeah. Hi, Raj.
So the one minute I'm just trying to. So the question is just now what we experienced. I just created an icon saying that if you have a slow connection and you want to be on the Zoom or any other alternative platform, what are the various options available for anybody to be effective on this, especially when you're working from home?
Okay. Good one. Rahul, you're on mute. Just again.
Raj, yeah, that's awesome. You've actually just taken a very real-time issue and crafted it into a problem statement. And I love that seal.
Thank you.
Hi, Agalia. In case there's time, I would like to go as well.
Yes, go on. Yes. Could you just come with you?
Yeah, just let me know if my notebook is visible.
Yes.
Yes, Tina.
Okay, so I have taken a challenge that is around Mumbai's Lifeline. We have the local trains that people commute more than 2,000-3,000 people in a train, and every day's commute numbers are over 1 lakh maybe. So how are we going to post-COVID world? How are we going to really maintain social distance here? Because it's shoulder to shoulder or bumper to bumper, as we say in a traffic sense. That's kind of density that we have. So that's really a problem, that the 2 meter distance may not help in this case. And what could be the solution? So I haven't really thought of a solution, but this is a depiction of just the problem statement.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Great.
Over to you, Rahul. Yeah. So,
All right.
just 1 second. Ajay has raised his hand. Ajay, you can talk. He's just raised.
I'm sorry to steal time. I mean, my
Yeah.
problem statement is how might we deliver love and experiences to people who are quarantined, can't travel, and can't even meet their loved ones. So it's looking after social isolation and loneliness of quarantined
Right.
people.
Thank you.
Hey,
Thank you.
Agalia, can I also share my visualization? Because I have
Please.
a small positive
Rahul,
note as
we
well.
will just take this one final. Okay.
Yeah.
Go on, Sharon. Yeah.
I love this.
Yes.
Just a second.
Yeah. We can.
Is it visible? It could
It's
be.
visible.
Yeah. So I have shown a negative and positive aspect. Yeah, people are forced to stay at home, but if we see a positive aspect, we can say nature is flourishing. We can see clearer water, we can see clear sky. Yeah, so that is one of the positive aspects that we have due to this COVID. Yeah.
Thank you, Cheryl. I think
Thank
most
you.
of us will agree with you also. Yeah, go on, Rahul. I mean, over to you again. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you, Agalya. So coming back to the example that we took about the quarantine lady isolated at home and needs contactless food delivery at the doorstep. This allowed you to very quickly start taking some of these common building blocks. Either you took some, you borrowed some from the universal set of visuals out here, from the library of visuals here. And by the way, these visuals have been made by Sabina, and she has actually crafted each one, cut it out on a piece of paper, and you're going to see even more of what she's done. I mean, it's just fabulous. This presentation was actually a very template-driven presentation about a week back or a few days back, and she's just turned it around and made it extremely visual. So I just want you to know what she's not able to tell you or what she may not tell you, even on the chat box, right? So she's literally started creating these little words and alphabets of visual vocabulary. And if we look at this and say that visual thinking is the vocabulary, it's the icon, it's the tools, or the mental models, or the metaphors. I'm using terms that have been used in some of the last sessions this week, right? Then what we really need to discern is the fact that if I start putting some of these visuals together in a meaningful way, which describes a problem statement or something waiting to be solved, then what you really have is the basic concept of design thinking, because design thinking then becomes the sentence, it becomes the syntax, it becomes the language, and it just gives it a framework to express the language more beautifully, to talk about a problem that's waiting to be solved, right? And so with that, what we want to do is to take a pause and reinforce the two definitions. One is design thinking, which is a very human-centered approach to innovation. It is about innovation because design thinking is defined as challenging assumption. It's a mindset. You need to keep in mind that design thinking is a mindset which challenges assumptions all the time because it thinks that there is a different way or an alternate solution that can solve the problem more effectively, right? So it's a human-centered approach to innovation. It draws from a toolkit and it integrates the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements of business success. Now, I've taken a very traditional definition by David Kelly, who is the founder of well-known design firm IDEO. And this IDEO and Stanford, these are considered to be pioneers in the work of design thinking. As a systems thinker, I personally might want to change this definition a little bit, because to me, design thinking should not be only human-centered. I think it should be planet-centered. And so if I have to reinvent this term, I would invite us to look at design thinking as a planet-centered approach to innovation, and which integrates the need of not just people, but the planet, using people, technology, to solve social impact also. So that's another way of looking at design thinking and broadening the breadth of the definition of what it is and what it can do. If I shift from design thinking to visual thinking, then I love this definition that both Agalya and Natasha had put together for the visual thinking bootcamp. Because I was hunting for a definition on Google and I just couldn't find something that convinced me. And when I reached out to Agalya and Natasha, and they said, here, this is what we've been using. And I looked at it and I said, perfect, this is exactly what I wanted to draw out, the parallels between design thinking and visual thinking. And so visual thinking is a way to organize your thoughts. It's really about the way your neurons are firing, the way it's allowing images and memories to reorganize themselves in your brain, and improve your ability to communicate. And it's also about using tools which make tacit information and tacit thoughts more explicit, more tangible. And so it becomes more clear and more specific and more actionable, because that's the only way to have a common language amongst a diverse group of people. Now, one of the things that I love about business transformation and collaboration work is we're always trying to solve problems that transcend a diverse group of stakeholders, an ecosystem of stakeholders. And when that happens, we realize that the problems needs to be defined across the board, and only then can the solutions be crowdsourced and become more meaningful. And there's a term there that is called requisite variety. And I believe that the complex and wicked problems of this world, and I believe one of our speakers this week is going to speak about that. I believe that the complex and wicked problems of the world can only be solved by crowdsourcing those ideas, insights, and solutions from a requisite variety of stakeholders. And when you have to do that, you need to create a common language. For example, the 100+ participants on this group, we probably have different native languages, different mother tongues. We're using English as a common language to be able to interact for this conversation. If I take a parallel, in the world of design thinking, visual thinking becomes a very powerful common language for diverse stakeholders to be able to come and start intuitively communicating and understanding what's the problem waiting to be solved and ways to express solutions. So with that definition, I'm going to invite us now to be introduced to what I call a playbook. Now, this is a very simple playbook. Believe me, there are exhaustive, complex playbooks out there, but Sabina has actually taken the trouble to really simplify this so that at the end of the session, you actually have at least a couple of tools in the toolkit to be able to go and start working. So if you're a design thinker, it's going to allow you to take a few of these concepts, visual thinking concepts, and start introducing it into your work. You've probably already been using a lot of visual thinking. You might find one or two more new ways or new insights to add to that. If you're a visual thinker, then this session is really to help you think about how can I push visual thinking to another level, and that is design thinking. And can I start working with design thinkers? Can I be a design thinker myself? And can I just move up the value chain and just expand the world of visual thinking and integrate it with design thinking, and maybe even systems thinking, and be able to make it a greater experience for your stakeholders, your clients, and your participants. And so with these two definitions, I'm now going to walk you through some of the design thinking frameworks that we are keen to introduce to you. So what Sabina has done is, so I'm going to pause here because before we go into design thinking frameworks, I'd just like to do a quick check, a quick dipstick. Do you have any questions? Well, we'll take questions at the end of the session, but is there something that you need immediately addressed to help you make this next jump into the frameworks? So if you do, then just put it down as a question. I'm going to invite Sabina to try and answer some of those. But Sabina, if you are able to jump back into conversations and you want to give it a shot, please do. I'd love for you to try it once more. This is really
all right, Rahul. Thank you so much. I think this is really design thinking in action. I'm going to give this another shot. If I'm clear, then I carry on. Otherwise, we spring back because really in the spirit of design thinking is nothing but iterating over and over again till you get it right. And if the gods, yes, Tina says the voice is very clear. So if I have a couple of more votes on that, then we can go ahead.
Yep.
All right.
Go ahead,
Yeah. I hope not clear again, then please feel free to pause my mic. Fantastic. All right, everyone. So we all as level 1 design thinkers. And there's a lot of terminology around there about design thinking frameworks, design thinking methodologies, design processes. There's a lot of diagrams, a lot of modules, etc. So when Rahul and what we really wanted to do for all of you is simplify this process. Is there one universal framework on where all of the other frameworks can fit in? Does the echo continue? Are you all good? Okay. So what we did is we've divided this into 3 basic steps. Step 1 is really, and Rahul, you can switch to next slide. Yes, step 1 is really the step about understanding, right? Understanding what you might ask, and we'll get into that a little later. But let's look at step 2. Step 2 is really all about, okay, I'm going to take Julie's advice and talk very slowly, right? Thank you. Step 2 is all about exploring, and step 3 is all about materializing. Okay, Rahul, yeah. So these are the 3 basic steps under which we are going to look at 6 sub-steps. So under understand, we have empathize and we have define. All right. And under step 2, that is explore, we have ideate and we have prototype. And under step 3, that is materialize, we have test and we have, Rahul, you can get implement. Yes, absolutely. All right. So remember what Rahul said in that definition, that design thinking is really about starting with the user or the human at the core. And that is why we have step 1, because if you look at the example of COVID lady at home, if we take that example, in empathize, what we really want to do is go back and conduct some research with her to try and better understand her problems, her pain points, what is this thing into her context, into her world, to try and understand it better. So that's empathize, right? And now moving on to step 2, which is define. Define is really bringing in all that understanding that we have about, whether it's the lady in question or about our user, and putting it into a statement, a problem statement. And again, to remind you, we gave you that example, where lady quarantined, and then we were looking at solutions for food delivery for her, for contactless food delivery. So that's really what define means. So step 1 is really starting from that user point of view, right? Empathizing and defining. Okay. Okay. Now, once we've done this, once we've really gotten into our user's world, defined their needs, defined a problem statement, then we try to solve the statement. And that's when we get into step 2, which is explore. All right. Now, the first step here is really about ideation. Ideation and generating a whole bunch of crazy ideas. And when we say crazy, we really mean crazy, because in this first step, there is no filtering of ideas. It's more quantity over quality. We can think of a whole bunch of ideas and just have them all there to choose from, to then debate which might be practical to take forward into a prototype. And that's the next slide. That's the next step, which is really about prototype. Once you've zeroed in on some ideas that you might like to try out, how are you going to take these abstract ideas, and make them very tangible, or make them very real and tactile? And something in the design thinking world, we love prototypes because we really don't have to spend too much money on the technical expertise behind a prototype at this stage. So for example, going back to the quarantine lady, if we have to develop a prototype of a contactless food delivery solution for her, how do we do it? We could either just, we could make a paper prototype of a design of a packaging. We could either develop an ad that she might see in the newspaper and decide to call in for that contactless food delivery. So basically the idea, or we could do, if it was an app, we could actually do just pictures of the screen that we're going to click through in the app, and that would be our prototype. So no technical investment, no capital investment at this stage, just a very simple prototype, right? So once you have this prototype, now what do you do with it? It's a very quick and dirty prototype. You need to go back to the user, back to Quarantine Lady, and test it out. So that's when we get into the materialize world. So we get into test, where we actually go back to her, whether it's an ad or whether it's a bunch of photographs of, screens of an app, anything you have, we go back to her and say, hey, what do you think? How might you respond to this? Do you think this is useful? Do you think this is something that caters to your problem? And that's the test phase. And this phase goes into some loops of iteration. So it might get iterated for a while, until you have some semblance that it is now practical to implement. And then we get into what is called the implement phase, where we actually bring this idea into a more technical ready state. So we probably invest in some technology, put in some capital, and make an actual physical product out of it, or a physical service. And then we take it again to launch. Absolutely. Arvind says that he's going to steal it, and I say, yes, go for it. This playbook is really made for all of you to share with everybody you know. Because really, Rahul and me are being very audacious here. We want everybody to become this kind of design thinker and start creating change. Rahul, could you go back on each of the steps all the way till empathize, if that's okay? Because someone wanted to see the empathize again. Yes. Yes. So now we can just go forward. Should we also test survey during the empathize phase? Absolutely. So we don't test, but we understand the user. There's nothing to test in the empathize phase, but really understanding the user in their environment, right? Yes, Rahul, we can go forward. Yes, all the way till the end. So, yes. Yeah. All right, perfect. Thank you very much. All right, so now everyone with me on these three very easy steps: understand, explore, and materialize, right? So now, what we've done for you is we've taken three modules, three frameworks that are out there, and we're just going to illustrate three of them to you. So Rahul, maybe you can put the Stanford model on. Yeah, so these are three frameworks: Stanford, Frog Design, and Explain. Stanford is a university, Frog Design is a consultancy and innovation consultancy, and Explain is also an innovation consultancy firm. Now, if you look at each of these, and we're not going into detail into each of these, but if you just glance at each of these, like Stanford has empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Somewhere all of these fall under that umbrella of understand, explore, and materialize. Same for Frog Design. If you look at Frog Design's model, it's seek, imagine, which falls under understand, make, plan, and build, which falls more or less under explore, or make and plan, and build and clarify, which falls under materialize. All right. So now we are going to go into the Explain framework for this particular session. And Rahul, maybe we can move to the Explain framework now. Yeah. All right. So now the Explain framework, and Explain again, as I'm mentioning, is an innovation consultancy firm by Dave Gray, as Tarun mentioned. Now they have, it's the same process. They have just worded it differently. So let's look at the wordings. They're talking about frame the opportunity as step 1, which completely correlates to our empathize and define, right? Step 2. Yes, okay. So step 2 is conduct research. So they've done exactly the same thing, but they've just put step 1 as step 2 and step 2 as step 1, which is also fine. Both come under the umbrella of understand, right? Okay, so now we go on to step 3, which is ideate, and that fits in with our ideate. So that's under explore, right? Step 4, which is prototype and test. So that's again falling under explore and a little bit under materialize. And step 5, which is learn, launch, and repeat, which corresponds totally to what we mentioned as implement. Now, the reason we wanted to show this to you is each one of you, wherever you go in the world, whatever design framework you come, and there are some very fancy names there, you should be able to tell yourself and tell people that, look, I know this framework can be broken down into 3 steps, basic: understand, explore, and materialize. And then you break it down and you make it very simple. So is everyone with me? Can I see a big thumbs up from everyone on that? Okay, that's fantastic. All right, so now over to Rahul, because Rahul's now going to take the explain framework, and as we told all of you, this is the larger design thinking framework. Now you're actually going to learn the tools and techniques to put this into action to solve your problem using visual tools and techniques. All right, so over to Rahul. Thank you.
Thanks, Sabina. And yes, that was a great walkthrough of the frameworks and the playbook. And if folks are wondering why did we choose to dive deeper into the explain framework, there's no bias to any of these frameworks, frankly. And finally, as Sabina walked us through, they more or less have the same philosophy of design thinking. They just express it differently. But the next slide is probably going to be a big clue as to why I chose this particular framework for this session. And that is because they have this beautiful visual, which actually draws out of that chest of visual thinking tools those little icons of visual thinking that beautifully align to each of these 5 steps. Now, I've taken this visual from the Explain blog, and I've given the link down there. So for those of you who are keen to read up more on this, it's a short article. And of course, Explain has tons of stuff out there. Dave Gray, the founder of Explain, is also one of my favorite authors. He's written a book. He's written several books. I know Natasha, in fact, we were discussing one of the books that she has, which is Game Storming. Many of you might be familiar with that. There's another book of his called Connected Company, which I love because Connected Company talks about the concepts of how organizations are ceasing to exist in the traditional hierarchical form. They're becoming flatter and they're actually becoming more of holarchies. And the moment an organization starts becoming more franchised and flatter, then it's about ecosystems. And it's no longer about the boundaries of an organization. So how do ecosystems come together? How do people collaborate across ecosystems? And what kind of platforms enable those ecosystems to survive and thrive? But that's about the book. That's about the author. And back to the Explain framework. What I'm going to do now is to share examples of how some of these visual thinking tools look like when taken to a client location, when done at a client site. I just want you to get, so many of you, especially the design thinkers, and I know there are some great design thinkers out here, practitioners. I'm sure a lot of these are familiar to you. This is really for the folks who are visual thinkers, but who haven't tested it out on design thinking. This is one way for you to know how these can be pushed to their limits for solving some of these classic business problems or social problems using design thinking. So for those of you who are design thinkers, it's possible that you might look at 1 or 2 new insights or nuggets and you might say, aha, this is something I haven't tried. I'd love to try it. For you to try it, all you have to do is to reach across to one of the visual thinkers in this group and say, hey, can we try that out? Let's make this a little better for the customer experience the next time you do a design thinking workshop. So I'm taking each of the steps. You'll see there's a purple box up there, which shows the 5 steps that Sabina walked us through. I've taken the first step, which is frame the opportunity. Now I've taken one of the icons. So just to show you here, we've taken 2 icons, both in the purple square boxes. One is called sense making, and at the bottom half of the slide is one called visualize your current state. So I'm just going back to the parent slide. In this, you'll see both these icons are more or less aligned to the frame the opportunity step of this methodology. There are some 13 icons out here. I'm going to show you about how 9 of these have been used. For want of time, and maybe because I don't have great examples of all 13, but at least I think I've got some examples that I can make it come alive and more real for you. So coming to the first step, frame the opportunity and sense making. Now this is a client who, this is an FMCG client who was trying to solve what they call an order management problem, where they said it takes us more than 2 days to order products from the factory to the retail shops, outlets. Well, we said if that's the problem, let's frame the opportunity and see if that's indeed the problem or is that the symptom. And so we used live scribing, graphic recording, as you would, it's known as, so graphic recording or graphic facilitation, where we had the sponsors talk about the business from each of their lens. So you had a sales head, you had a production head, you had a supply chain head. So different functions of an organization, the leaders came and they spoke about the same problem from their perspective, their lens. When we put it out there, we suddenly realized that it's not just about solving an order management problem. We realized there are many, many other challenges, and that was just a symptom. And so I'm not going to go too deep into the case study or what was the problem we were trying to solve, but I'm going to focus more on how we used this form of visual thinking, which is graphic facilitation or graphic recording, to make sense of multiple perspectives, diverse stakeholders who were looking at the problem through their own individual lens, right? So that's about sense making. At the lower bottom half of the slide, we used something called systems thinking, and it's a systems thinking tool which helped the participants to craft and visualize the current state of the organization for the same problems that they were going through that I've spoken about in the top half, right? Now, there's a lovely TED talk by Tom Vucek, and it's titled How to Make Toast or How to Draw Toast. I'll put the link in the slide, but even if you don't get the link, you just have to Google How to Draw Toast by Tom Vucek. Just go out and have a look at that TED talk. It's really a great primer, a great introduction on the concept of using nodes and links to really help put multiple versions of processes in an organization or in a social organization on a single page, so that diverse stakeholders are able to say, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. How do you get everybody who's got one piece of the puzzle to put that piece together in a very coherent fashion so that it creates that big picture, the systems view? Because that's, again, a great way to visualize the current state, right? So the concept of nodes and links was used through that video, through that example of how to draw toast, and then we got them to apply it to their own business problems. So on the right-hand side, you see how they drew their challenge and how it actually allowed, for the very first time, cross-functional participants had one single view of what the problem looked like at a larger level, right? Rather than just through a straw. Because most people tend to look at the problem through a straw, through their perspective, through their lens. But imagine when everybody looks at it through their own individual lenses and you put it together, you want to know what that looks like. What does the big jigsaw puzzle look like? So these are 2 visual thinking tools that we use for frame the opportunity. The second step of the 5-step process that Sabina walked us through is called conduct research. And here we use empathy mapping. Now, if you look at the right half of the slide, you'll see how research So let me give you a little context of what brought this research out. So we went and we interviewed something like 20 to 30 stakeholders across India in 5 cities. I was a part of one of those teams. We actually went and conducted interviews. We observed their style of functioning, a day in the life of their work. And then we got that research back. We documented it. We allowed it to emerge in terms of patterns. Those patterns threw up problem statements. And then those problem statements were played back to the key stakeholders to say, look, this is what the empathy phase has thrown up. Here's the research that has come out of the field. Now, how do you put up that research so that it becomes a common language for everyone to look at and say, that's interesting. And then they can have great conversations around that. So in the second half, in the right half of the slide, the one which is numbered 1, that is what I would call a pre-scribe. Now that pre-scribe is done by our very own talented Natasha. So Natasha and I were working on this client project together. And what she did was she looked at a lot of the research that came in, a lot of the insights, and she was able to discern clusters and chunks of those insights and themes that came up. And then that's what she put into a visual form. So that's one way of using visual thinking for playing out the outcomes and output of research. A little after that, you see an image of brown paper with a lot of post-its numbered 2. Now that is where we had detailed level insights that came out of the field interviews, and those were clustered into larger patterns and put up there for people to again read through, because that increases the credibility of the field research and the fact that the problem statements have emerged from out there, not sitting in an armchair and imagining what the problems of the world are, right? And then the third kind of research output that was used was what you see as number 3. Now that is an empathy map, and there's a big blowout of that on the left half of the screen. Now that shows 3 different stakeholders. So you can see the stakeholders labeled at the bottom half of the screen. You see a distributor, you see a BDE, which is a business development executive, and you see a CSO, which is your customer service officer. And you see across the process at the, how do each of these 3 stakeholders experience that process? And you can see there are times when they're smiling because it's a great process. Then there's suddenly a dip in the process because now they went, there are handshakes across and they're going through a little bit of a negative experience. Then again, it picks up and it keeps fluctuating up and down. But look at how beautifully it's expressed in one single piece of paper, how 3 stakeholders are experiencing a process across the value chain. So empathy mapping, this is one form of empathy mapping. It's not necessarily the example of empathy mapping, but this is one more way for you as visual thinkers and design thinkers to be able to bring that research alive in the room. Now, I'm going to the third step, which is ideate. Now, there are 2 parts here. One is about brainstorming, one is about journey mapping. This slide is about journey mapping. Now, we've used a template for stakeholder mapping. What does it mean? It means that when each of those stakeholders are going through the process, they are getting influenced, or each step of the process is influencing multiple stakeholders. And so if I take one specific touch point of the journey and say who's getting impacted by this particular touch point, then I realize that there's someone in customer servicing who's facing a challenge, there's someone in marketing, there's someone in the distributors are facing certain challenges, the planning team is facing challenges. Then I start crafting mini problem statements for each of
Rahul, we lost you, Rahul. We're not able to hear you.
Yeah, maybe there is a fluctuation, power fluctuation or something.
Okay. All right.
Would you like me to step in for some time?
Please, yeah, I was about to ask you, Sabina. Could you just continue a little bit for some time till he comes?
Yes, sure, sure, absolutely. So, so we're on stakeholder mapping, which is really about looking at the problem statement. And you see that little petal-like flower in the middle.
that is basically looking at the different stakeholders in the company, the different departments that might be. I think we lost the screen there. So just to keep going with that, we look at the different stakeholders or different us in the company that might get impacted by each of the solutions that have come by, and we plot all of these ideas. The ideas are on the yellow post-its. Remember, we spoke about brainstorming and idea generation. So a lot of times ideas are captured on post-its. And when we do the stakeholder mapping, we take each of these. Okay, I'm going to speak more slowly. Sound okay. I think Rahul is back, but I'll
Rahul, are you back?
For a while.
We are not able to see you, but yeah, I can see you in the.
I'm back. I can hear, but keep going, Sabina.
Okay, fantastic. Rahul, yeah, I'll let you take over.
Yeah, because there's a fluctuation from our end. If you could take over, please.
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah.
So, so ideation is, again, like I said, it's brainstorming is one more expression of ideation, and this is really about the good. And this is probably the most common form of ideation that most of you have experienced. But I want to go back to that term that Sabina had introduced when she was walking through that playbook. It's about a blitzkrieg of crazy, zany ideas. And here, what we say is there's no good idea or bad idea. Don't apply any filters. Don't prejudge whether this idea is feasible. Is it technically feasible? Is it going to cost money? Do I have the resources? Just go for it. Let it just go blue sky thinking within the boundaries defined. But come up with tons of ideas, and those ideas will then self-organize and they will get prioritized, right? So ideation is really about getting the wisdom of the crowd out there on those post-its to start solutioning the problem statements that are being addressed. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this is, I would imagine that brainstorming is probably something that most folks are familiar with. I'm going to look at prioritization, which is again one part of ideation. Now here what we had done is we created a large massive grid on two whiteboards, and we had impact as one axis and we had feasibility as the other axis. So it automatically gave you 4 quadrants, where the ideal quadrant where you wanted the best solutions to get qualified would be in the high impact, high feasibility. Now, obviously, when we say high impact, it's about, is this really worth it? Is it going to make significant change in people's lives? Or is it going to improve the top line or the bottom line of an organization? Is it going to improve the social impact that a citizen needs to feel, right? Is it going to create a much better app feature? So those are examples of high impact. How feasible is it? That's more about, do I have the talent and the skills to make it happen today? Or at least can I reach out and get access to them? Are they within reach? Maybe there's a broad direction about and guidance about the budgets. Is it something that the organization is willing to invest in? So those are really the 2 parameters for defining that quadrant and for validating ideas and prioritizing. Then you might have some ideas which might fall into the high impact but low feasibility. And so you'll say, well, that's still a blockbuster, not like those blockbusters up there in the upper right quadrant, but I would still want to think about these and not really chuck it out. Of course, then you have the low impact, high feasibility, which says, well, I have everything to do this, but it's got negligible impact. And so, you don't want to touch those. And of course, the ones which are low impact, low feasibility, it's very interesting. You obviously, no one wants to be in that quadrant. And so when you do this exercise, you have to just make sure you've got filters that people are really hold themselves accountable to, because you can see how ideas find their way out of that quadrant, and they obviously try to just go right across diagonally and jump from low impact, low feasibility to high impact, high feasibility. But you really have to have, you probably want to invite a Dragon's Den, a team of experts who are really going to validate that, Shark Tank style, and say, Is that really a great idea? Is that really high impact? Is that really highly feasible? And so this is one great way of using visual thinking for people to look at how those ideas become solutions, and how those solutions actually, when described in detail, can actually find their way to the next level, which is through prioritization. I'm going to jump to the next slide, which is about.
We have a question here. Tina is asking what's on the first quadrant, top quadrant. If you can go behind, when you said feasibility.
Yes, so the top right quadrant, is that the one?
Mm-hmm. The first one, still the blockbuster. I think that's high impact and low feasibility, right?
Okay, so in that quadrant, that's a quadrant where you say, for example, it's still a great idea. It's still an idea which has the potential to make high impact. But the only reason it hasn't found its way into the other top right quadrant is because of the feasibility. And what we mean by feasibility is perhaps it requires a certain skill set. Perhaps it requires a certain resource which the organization may not have access to today. Maybe it lies that lies with competition. Maybe it lies with another partner company, and you're not sure if you're going to be able to partner that company and get them to be a part of this. And so that's the only reason why it's still in this quadrant. But it means that there's an opportunity for decision makers based on this to say, hey, if we have a great blockbuster of an idea, but it just needs some more resources that are not currently within access, do we want to go and explore how to bring those back in? That's when you'll see some of these ideas shift from that quadrant, from the left to the right, and become high impact, high feasibility. Right? So feasibility is about, do you have the skills? Do you have the resources? Do you have the people, the process, the technology to make it happen? Those are three broad guidelines. Does that help, Tina?
Yeah, hi, Rahul. It's helpful. I just wanted to know, like, each quadrant, there's an expression as well, which is quite in a quirky way crafted out. Tough luck, nice try, still a blockbuster. So what is that expression that, you have used in the top right quadrant?
Okay, so that was blockbuster. So that's the one which is hidden.
Oh, okay. So still a blockbuster to moving to a blockbuster then.
Yeah. So we use the metaphor of the Oscars, and we said, do you have an Oscar-worthy entry here? And which would make it a blockbuster. So, if it was Oscar-worthy, it would become a blockbuster. If it was low on feasibility, you'll say, well, it's still a blockbuster. Tough luck is where you say, well, you tried, but it just didn't cut the ice. And nice try is where you say, well, it's a little better. It had, it was feasible, but again, low impact. So these are terms used in the context of what if this was an Oscar award nomination.
Quite a nice way of relating things. So thanks for sharing.
Sure. And thanks for asking, because I realized, that kind of got hidden in all that clutter. Thanks for that.
I have one question.
Yes.
Yeah. So who decides which idea would go in which quadrant? Is it the facilitator, or who is it who's placing it like in different quadrants?
That's a great question. Ideally, we would love for the wisdom of the crowd to self-organize themselves and say, so the way it happened in this particular exercise was each team came up, they spoke about their idea. And so each tile that you see there is one idea from one team. Maybe there were 4 or 5 teams. When they presented their idea, we would then look at the audience, the participants, and we would say, well, do you think this is a blockbuster, or do you think it's a potential blockbuster or not? And so we would have a conversation happening across participants, and that conversation would broadly yield a consensus. Now that can become a little subjective. And so it's very important to lay down certain criteria to say what would qualify as a blockbuster. And so we had created some guidelines with the help of the sponsors, that is the client sponsors. And looks like I might go off again because I've just lost electricity. So I'm just going to switch to. If you are on phone, then okay. So I'm just going to keep speaking. Yeah, this is on phone, so I'm good for now. Okay, thanks. I'm using my wife's cell phone as a hotspot, so it looks like I'm ahead of the electricity. So that's a quick answer to your question about how does one determine, who determines whether it fulfills the criteria or not. It has to be designed with the sponsor, and based on that, then allow the sponsors to say, the sponsors finally have to take a call, because the facilitator is the facilitator. He has an opinion, he makes it easy for the groups to take a decision, but finally, the business criteria has to come from the client sponsors, and that has to be agreed beforehand or in that moment.
Right. I think that's brilliant when we are including everyone. Ideas could be generated by a few people, but it's like the decision is like a one from all of the participants.
Absolutely, because some of these ideas might have been worked on just by one team, which is a cross-functional team, but it's very likely that these would become organization-wide initiatives. And the whole concept of garage teams, cohorts, is really about creating small-sized cross-functional teams who can take an idea and incubate it into reality in the organization. And they have to be very unbiased, whether it was their idea or it came from another team, because they have to champion it and take it forward. But at this moment of time, it's in the spirit of healthy competition. We get them to really test out each other's thinking and validate, is this really worthy of being taken to the next level? And yes, and this one was fun and it was tricky, but they did it for themselves. There are some groups, you'll find that some organizations have that experience and wisdom and leadership to be able to do this amongst themselves at a participant level. There are some organizations where there is a tendency for hierarchy to dominate, where suddenly the leader will come in and say, yes, this is in, or no, that's out. You really want to avoid those situations, right? Because like you said, you want it to be a democratic process. You want everyone to feel that their idea at least was presented to everybody else, and then the objective wisdom of the crowd really helped decide, does this idea have merit to go forward or not? All right, so in the interest of time, I'm going to quickly go to the next two steps, and because we do want to keep to at least 10 minutes for Q&A. These are examples of visual prototyping and storyboarding. Now, in this particular case study, which is the same case study that I've been actually talking about across those 5 steps, they finally were able to define a digital transformation solution, an app, which would enhance the customer experience to solve the problems that were being addressed right from start. And so they wanted to, in a single workshop, in a 2-day workshop, say, what could some of these apps look like? And so they actually drew some of what those screens could look like. Now, those of you who are UX, user experience experts, or GUI experts, as we call them, for you, this is probably par for course. You do this day in and day out. But for other visual thinkers who have not yet been introduced to this becomes a powerful way of expressing what a solution could look like, what it should look like, right at the drawing board stage, based on all the work that you did in the first 3 steps. So you went through frame the context, you went through define the problem, you went through ideate, and then you came to prototype and research. And that's where these teams created this. Now, I just want to point out this little image, which is the one in the red box. So for example, this was done by Natasha again. And this was done because she spent some time with the customer team there in the workshop with one of the breakout teams. And they knew the solution that was coming to their mind, but they said, we need to be able to express it visually. Can you help us? And so she sat with them in their breakout, and she actually helped draw this up for them. And this is a beautiful example of storyboarding. How would a customer journey touch points progress in the new world, with the new solution, right? This is also a mental model. They know what the solution is beginning to look like. They have a mental model, and Agalya had spoken about mental models in her session earlier this week. So mental models are also very powerful for expressing how, or using visual thinking to converge that design thinking solution into reality. I'll go to the next slide, which is the last step, learn, launch, and repeat. Now, this one's using 2 of the visual thinking techniques. One is visual road mapping, and what is visualizing the future state. It's also using a start, stop, continue tool. So let me first speak about the visual road mapping. Visual road mapping is about, so what will different screens look like as a user goes through the app experience? What will that future state application experience look like on a digital device? So these have been created by tools, and there are plenty of tools out there in the market. If you Google them, they actually allow you to simulate what an app screen could look like, and that feeds the actual development of those digital transformation solutions and apps. I'm talking about here, in this case, the solution was a digital transformation solution. It was meant to become an app for the users. Now, at the same time, when you learn, launch, and repeat, and as Sabina spoke, this is about the critical part about testing and moving from testing to implementation. And there's a critical step that people need to do at that point, which is, once I start introducing a new solution, it is change. It's about change management. You have to get people to think about, what are they going to stop doing? What are they going to start doing? What are they going to continue doing? And then allow that to fuel the implementation of the new solution. And so again, we've used visual thinking here, and you can see that some of those group conversations on what should start, stop, and continue have been actually drawn up there. So with that, I come to the end of this particular section of how this was used. Here are a few resources, online resources for all of you to go and get more, because there's only 1.5 hours for us to have shared things, but there's plenty and tons of stuff out there. I'm also going to invite the group wisdom of the participants. Many of you are experienced design thinkers and visual thinkers who have already done some of this. If you can share some resources on the chat box, then there are others out there who are also waiting to lap it up, consume it, go and explore more. And so with that, I hand it back to, I'm going to invite Sabina if she wants to add something more, but otherwise back to Agalya.
Yeah. Sabina, do you want to talk something about it? I mean, she's super live in chat anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Rahul, I think that was very comprehensive. At this stage, I don't think I add anything. I think it's quite. Okay.
We actually lost you, Sabina. Just a minute. Okay. So I think I'll go. Yeah.
Agalya, let's.
Could you just type it?
Questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's invite questions. Yeah. Let's invite.
Sure. So Shruti has she's been asking about the HCD framework and ICE. Just a second. It just went down. Okay. It's about ICE, stands for Impact, Confidence, and E-Score, and HCD framework. Could you just talk more about it, Rahul? Shruti, you can also unmute yourself, because your question just gives a little bit of pointer. If you can unmute yourself and be clear with the question, we can take it forward.
Yes.
Shruti?
Yeah, there is a huge. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go on.
Okay, HCD stands for Human Centered Design, and IC I've already stated about. So these two frameworks we use in design thinking, especially the user experience. So I just wanted to check what are the VT. There are VT also available. How is it? This is different from the other which we mentioned in the con.
So how is that different, Rahul? Rahul? Okay. Thanks, Shruti. I think, Rahul, we lost you. Sabina, do you have an answer for this? Sabina or Rahul?
Hello. Yeah, could you please repeat the question? I couldn't catch the question. Could you please repeat it?
Shruti, meanwhile, just post the question here, because even
I'll type.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, and there is one more question from Rohit about role playing. When do we get role playing into design thinking? That's one of the questions he asked. If you have any pointers
Sure.
around that.
Yes. So Rohit, role playing can come in two places. The first place it can come in is in the empathize. Right at the very beginning in step one, if you want to empathize with your customer, you can use role playing. A very beautiful example is we do empathy interviews. Sometimes get two people to interview each other and get into their shoes, the customer's shoes, right? So you can use it there. You can also use role playing in your iterate phase when you're testing out a prototype. Again, you can interchange roles, wear different hats, and pull out different perspectives to the product.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you so much, Sabina, for the answer. I just have a very quick question as well, if you can hear me.
Yeah, go on.
Do we have a maximum limit of participants in a DT workshop that we can stick to, or what is the ideal number of people to have in a DT workshop?
If you would ask me, then
so
yeah, go on. Yeah.
Go ahead, Agalya.
No, there is nothing like participant as such, because we have done it with 20 people, or we have done it with 1,000 people also put together. So nothing as a count, but you might need that much resource to facilitate. That is what I would say. Yeah, there's no number.
I will just add one thing, that every large group can be broken into much smaller breakouts, and each breakout gets about like 8 people, 10 people. And these are people who work together very closely in a small group. So that is why we can work with very large numbers of people, because ultimately we break them down into very small working groups. So, yeah.
Right.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. I
have a quick one. What is the timeline here? Like to execute this process, is it a 5-day process or a 1-day process or 100 days, 200 days? How do you define the sprint here?
Okay, so just from my experience, I have actually worked on projects that go all the way for about 6 months to even 8 months. And as well at Capgemini, at the Accelerated Solutions environment, we even do this process in 2 to 3 days. But there we really focus on crunching it into a workshop module. A lot of the work is done as prep work. So a lot of the work that comes in is prep before the workshop. So we can stretch this process. Again, it really depends on the objective. So in a workshop, the objective is not to get to a physical product or a physical prototype. It is just to get to a common point of decision making or a common solution, right? And then the company is going to continue working with the design and technology. But when you work as a consultant on a project, you might actually want to come up with a phone prototype at the end of it. So that might be a 6-month or an 8-month process. And if you're doing the understand user bit, there are projects that I've worked on where we've actually gone and stayed in villages with farmers to understand them better. That process can take about 1 month to 2 months also. So yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Sabina. So actually, we have come to the end of the session right now. Any more questions, you can always connect with Rahul or Sabina in LinkedIn. You can post your comments there. I have, like usual, put in the feedback link in the chat. And for those people who think, too much activity also happened in chat and you want to save it, there's a way of saving it all by yourself. Just go to that link button beside a file, and there is something called save chat. You can save the whole conversation. If you think a lot of inputs lay there, just keep doing it. And before logging off, let's go for the form for like 30 seconds to start with. I'll give 30 seconds right now. You can quickly log in and just give in your answers. And today, out of all, we need all your inputs because there was a lot of lag in technology also. So we definitely need your feedback here. And after which, as
And
usual, we'll go for the
Sanjay, your email address, I'll just put it on that group itself.
Yes, please.
Agalia, just one final word before you give your prompt, if I may.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to thank everybody for bearing with us, on the technology lags, especially with me. And I really, really want to encourage all of you to go out there and become agents of change. So please take this and begin practicing right away. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sabina.
Sir.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Awesome.
I don't
Thank you
know.
for really making us.
If it is a open time, na, I would have even picked you up and taken you to Guwahati and finished it off. But right now we are in a situation where we can't do.
Okay. Rahul, yes, go on.
Yeah,
Rahul,
so
do you want
it's
to
been an
give-
amazing group, and I want to say thank you to you, Agalia, to Natasha, and to Piyush for helping us set this up for success. Thank you to the wonderful participants for being patient when we were working around technology, and to Sabina for putting together this fantastic visuals, and for the script, for the storyboard, for the session. Like I said, we had something else at the start. Using design thinking, we kept iterating, and this is what we came to. So thanks for making it all great for all of us.
And also, I want to thank all the other participants who have, shared their inputs very so much of insight. If you see, that's why I said if you want to concentrate on chat, save it, because too much of inputs keep happening. Links, pointers. Everyone just collaboratively came to some kind of knowledge definitions. Everything. Thank you so much, everyone. So we will just ask Natasha to share her screen, and can we see what you've done for design thinking, Natasha? If you can share your screen. Yay. I've never seen Rahul in red. Thank you.
I love that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And yes, finally, for tomorrow we have, see, the way it is crafted, this whole session, if you've seen, visual practice is started first, and how visual practice and design thinking are related now. That's what we see. And tomorrow we have Piyush talking about this visual thinking and how do we take it to the digital platform, digital marketing platform. And this is for all of us. It's not that you have to be technically sound in handling it. Even if you're not, that's the better way. In fact, those people, you will get more of what tips and inputs that he's going to give us tomorrow. I'm totally waiting for it. And Piyush, over to you. If you want to just give us a glimpse of what you're going to talk about, a minute or so, could you?
Quickly, I will demonstrate how I executed this whole boot camp. So anyone who's looking for how to make your event successful, how to run your Facebook ads successfully, will be learning a lot of digital marketing campaigning, like how Rahul today explained what design thinking is. I'll be explaining you how you can make your own design digital marketing campaigns, but using visuals. So now, as the days are progressing, we are now combining visual thinking plus an expertise. So today you learned design thinking plus visuals. Tomorrow you will learn digital marketing plus visuals. So
cool. So we are waiting for it. I think the final photo moments we will take a little bit, and then close the session for today.
Yes. And we know what's our symbol?
That's fine. Just like this.
And give me at least 30 seconds to take screenshot. I hope you all are visiting the Facebook group for the pictures. If not, then I'll again be sharing the link with you all. And one more, wait. Everything is being posted on the Facebook group. So visit there and you'll be able to see all the live scribings. As the days are progressing, there are more live scribes than the first day. So enjoy the lives which people are doing. Thank you. I've taken pictures.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks a lot. We'll see to it tomorrow. Yeah, same time. Thank you. Bye. Bye. Right. Thanks, Tim. Bye. Bye, Rohit.
A
lot of new faces, yeah.
We see Arend.
Arend, thank you. Oh, wow. Thank Thank
So
you.
Rohit always does it like this. I always see.
Oh, this is Tim's.
Wow, wow, Tim.
Yeah, super. I'll just put you in a spotlight video. I want to see it. Oh,
Nice.
very nice. Thank you. Just do share with us. Please share with us or tag us definitely. Oh,
All right. Thank you guys. You guys are doing
thank you.
fabulous.
See you. Bye, Divya. Yeah.
Bye.
Evelyn.
We'll have, we'll wait.
Ricardo.
for
Yeah.
Rahul and Sabina.
Yes, I'll just ask both of them to join.
Have you stopped the recording, Piyush?
Yes.
That is